right now called Flourish. It's all about relationships.
We'll be sharing the things that we've learned, things that we got right, things that we got wrong, and even some things that we still struggle with.
And it's not just about marriage. God has brought key relationships into each of our lives so that we could flourish. But if we don't develop the skills to nurture those relationships, we will live a life of broken relationships, constant hurt, and be deprived of a lot of good that God is looking to bring us.
It's rich and it's real.
We've been married 32 years and 9 months.
And it's all been fun.
Not all of it, but it's been a great process, and we've enjoyed it.
The challenge has been worth it. From the very beginning, God said it is not good for man to be alone. In other words, we need relationships. You are incomplete without the gifts that God has put in other people. You need other people. You need the gifts God has put in other people to complete you.
Even good relationships can get broken. And man, we've got to do something about that, because these are God-given relationships. These are relationships that God put into our lives so that we could be whole, so that we could learn, so that we can grow together. Our lives and our relationship.
Committed.
Healthy.
Loving.
Nurturing.
Growing.
Strong.
Life-giving.
The word tells us, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Now let me just ask you a question. Is that painful? Come on, think about it. It's telling us, as iron sharpens iron. We're so used to having these animated cartoons for our kids, and it's like, oh, they feel the pain. It's the same way in relationships, and I thought it was quite apropos that we sang the last song, Purify Me, because when we're asking God to purify us, guess what we're asking for? It begins with a P and ends with an ain. Anyone? Pain.
In John chapter 8, it says the teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard, notice we highlighted those who heard began to go away one at a time. The older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. Jesus is writing on the ground in the sand, but they heard a voice. They heard the voice of their conscience. And so they began to leave. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." It's really easy for us to see the flaws of other people and to get righteously indignant about those flaws. Even in relationships, whether it's a marriage or a friendship, we see easily what the other person did wrong, and we want to point out the problem there. But notice what happened with these guys is that when they saw their own flaws, right? Jesus is writing on the ground, doesn't say exactly what he was writing, but what he was writing indicated to them that they were not qualified to throw a stone at her. And they hear the voice of their conscience and they start to feel guilty. And then one by one, they begin to go away, realizing, you know what? I'm not qualified to judge her, and they leave. And so as we're opening up our discussion today, talking about relationships and how to flourish in life by developing the skills to nurture those relationships, it's really critical, it's foundational that we understand when we get a revelation of our own flaws, when we recognize that I'm not perfect, in any given situation where you could be really upset about it, and maybe it's your spouse or your friend who really offended you, in that situation, it's good for us to realize that in general, right, the thing that I am upset about them doing, I've done myself. And even in this situation, if I could see it clearly, I'd probably see that I didn't handle it exactly right. And what happens when you have a revelation of your flaws is that you stop taking the position of the judge.
And a word of humility comes up. And let me tell you, it's hard to be humble, right? I'm not the only one, hands out there. It's hard to be humble because from the time we were born, we have in us flesh. And this flesh has been tainted by sin. What threw Satan out of heaven was pride. And that's in us. And we see it from the time we have those, what we call terrible twos. We never blessed our children with that name. We said, oh no, you're not terrible twos. And why? Because we just put that blessing on them. But why do we say that? It's because that pride starts to come out. It's mine. It's about me. It's my toy. And we lose that as we grow older, but we don't lose it to the fullness of where God is in his humility, because God is humble. You know, one of the fruit of the Spirit that we have to remember, because some people say, oh, I just wish I was more humble. I wish I was more gentle. That word is translated in Galatians, where it's talking about what the fruit of God's Spirit in us looks like. It's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. That word gentleness is humility. So we can't just say, yeah, I just got to get better at this. We have to water humility, just like we water patience. So when we're asking God for more patience or more humility, recognize we're asking him to bring something so uncomfortable that in order to water it, we have to say, ouch, yep, that's it. And recognize that we are not the legends in our own mind that we think we are. And situations happen between really close relationships that are kind of funny stories as we look back on them. All of our stories is that one is highly exaggerated one way. Come on, you've had these conversations too with people you're close to. And his story is highly exaggerated another way, where he's the angel and I'm the devil, and then I'm the angel and he's the devil. It's like we build these pictures in our own mind, and yet Holy Spirit has given us some practical skills to how do we get ourselves to this place of humility so that we can really work in this relationship.
In Matthew 7, Jesus said, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. The problem is that when emotions come into play, when there's a disagreement, and we can use the example of husband and wife, but it applies not just in a marriage, but it applies in any relationship. It applies in your relationship with your best friend. It applies in your relationships in churches. When there is a disagreement or when a situation arises, emotion rises up, and that emotion causes you to not be able to see clearly. Jesus said, you're blind. Right? You can't see the issue clearly. All you can see is what the other person did wrong. And in reality, sometimes when you step back, and if you could look at it objectively, what was such a big deal, you thought that The other person had the plank in their eye. They're the ones with the big problem. And if you did anything wrong, it was just a little bit. And sometimes it's the other way around. And when our emotions come into play in dealing with any situation, we tend to focus so much on a hurt that hurt prevents us from seeing clearly. So here, foundationally, what we're saying is that understand this is reality, is that you're not able to see everything exactly as it is. How you perceive a situation where you disagree with someone or are upset with them or you're hurt and they're hurt, whether it's, again, a husband-wife or it is, a friendship, how you perceive it is really warped. You're only seeing one side of it. And so humility is so critical for me to come in and recognize that if I'm upset with my wife over a situation, I'm probably not seeing the full picture. It's probably not exactly as I see it. And when it's all said and done, right, it's very possible that I'll look back on the situation that I was extremely upset about that she did, and I realize, holy cow, what a jerk I was. I was the one that was really the bigger problem. So when you go into it that way, emotions are high, but when you understand that at the onset, that this is how I feel and this is how I see, but it may not be right. It may not be exactly accurate. Then it opens up the door for you to work through that situation next to become stronger.
But let's face it, it's hard to do that, right? Come on, you're hurt, right? And the first thing that wells up, see, I'm the passionate one in this relationship. See, if you see Tim anywhere, I've had people come up to me after, we'd be out. I think we were going to a kids' soccer or a basketball game or something, and we were in ministry at that time, and they came out to me and said, "What's wrong with Pastor Tim?" And I looked at him and I thought, nothing. But she was used to him seeing him up here where he could be passionate, but his personality is not really passionate. And so,
Are you saying I'm boring?
No, not at all. It's that we complement each other, my love. I am a passionate, wild person. How many of you know me out there?
She is a
I'm
passionate
crazy.
person.
I admit, I am just a crazy, passionate person.
Sometimes it's a little over the top.
Over the top, and he's got it. And because we complement each other, he says, "Honey, you got to calm down." But when emotions come, when you get hurt, I could be the worst woman to be married to, because if I'm hurt, I'm also passionate about that. And so, but it's really important, and we just want to walk you through just some really simple steps.
I think we're going to provide some really good practical help today to, especially men, if you feel like you're dealing with a wife who is very emotional and you're having a hard time relating because what she's saying just doesn't make any sense, and why can't she see this, and yet she's really, really upset. And it doesn't just have to be the male-female, that's just kind of the traditional thing, but also in friendships. When your emotions get involved, here's the point I want you to take away today. When emotions are involved, it's impossible for you to deal with the situation rationally. I wish I really got that. I wish I knew that, when we first got married. I wish I really knew it now. But when my wife, when her emotions kick into gear regarding any situation, it's impossible for me to talk her off a ledge and talk reasonably to her about, well, you shouldn't feel that way. Listen, here's a good clue for a lot of you guys. When somebody is hurt, when there's an emotional wound there's two options that you have. You can help to heal the wound, or you can aggravate the wound, right? What you do not have the ability to do, what you do not have the right to do, is to say, you shouldn't feel that way. Oh, I wish someone had told me that. I wish I still really, really got that. When my wife is upset about something, I need to recognize, right, regardless of whether this is nuts, whether this makes any sense at all, I need to recognize she is upset. She's wounded. She's hurting emotionally about a situation, even if she shouldn't be. even if it doesn't make any sense that she is. I have two options. I can help heal the wound, or I can aggravate the wound. But what I cannot do is tell her that her wound doesn't make sense, that she shouldn't be hurt about this.
And the problem with all relationships is a word called offense, right? Because when we get offended, we don't realize something happens within us. And it's in Proverbs, the 18th chapter. It says this: it is harder to win back the friendship of an offended brother than to capture a fortified city. Okay, those are two extreme things. It's harder to win back a person who's been offended than to go into a city and fight everybody there and win. It says his anger shuts you out like iron bars. That is where a lot of relationships just fall apart in this key moment. And it has to do with your emotions. You know, emotions are real. And it doesn't mean that they're right. I have been totally wrong in most of my emotions. And yet,
Not most of them, but some of them.
some of them. Thank you. I didn't pay him to say this. That was good. But
You can pay me later.
okay, let's move on. But emotions are really, really important, because explain your mat in the
Okay.
foyer. He comes up with this good illustration, so I'll let you tell it.
Listen, every one of us, for every one of us, emotions are the entryway to human experience, right? In other words, when somebody says something or does something that affects you, emotions are the first thing to deal with that, to process that. And so I compare emotions to the entryway of a house. And so for me, when we have an issue, right? That issue first presents itself it's like a visitor coming into the house. That issue first presents itself into the foyer, the entryway. And I am like our first apartment. Our first apartment was tiny, 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 right? Our entryway was a 1x2 welcome mat right inside the front door. So that was our entryway. You stepped in, you wiped off your feet, and then one step, and ta-da, you're in our living room. And you can, sit down, and we can talk, and we can reason and discuss, right? So the way I'm built is my entryway, which is my emotional response to a situation, is very small. So it goes through the emotions really quick and immediately jumps into the living room, the realm of let's sit down and talk about this. Let's reason together. Now, Christine, on the other hand, she's not like our little apartment. She's like a massive mansion with this huge foyer. And so when a situation presents itself, a visitor comes through that door, right? They're hanging around in that foyer a long time before they can actually come and sit down, and we can, in the living room, and we can discuss it. Now, I don't really appreciate that because of the way I'm wired. I do right now as we're talking about it, but in real life, I don't. And so when a situation comes up, right, for all of us, our first response is emotional, but for me, that happens so quickly, and I begin to reason. I begin to think, well, why did this person do this, and maybe this is good and whatever. But she needs me to come into the foyer as she's dealing with that situation and to deal with the fact that she's experiencing it emotionally. And she needs for me to tell her it's okay. She needs for me to validate her feelings. She needs for me to understand her feelings, right? She needs me, in other words, when that experience presents itself, she needs me to go into the foyer and visit for a while, maybe so she can vent and tell me how she feels. I don't do that. I don't give her that courtesy. As soon as that situation arrives, I grab her arm and I jerk her into the living room. Well, let's sit down and talk about this. She's not ready to talk about it, right? And it's not a matter of who's right and who's wrong. That's the problem. That's the way I look at it, is like, it's just logical, right? Let's just talk this out. It's not a matter of talking it out. I want to get to the living room and just bypass the foyer, where she wants to hang around in the foyer for a long time.
Do you get that? So I like his little examples. They're good. So, but, and I don't know, like, it's not just a man and women thing. He said, well, men are like, and I said, but I've seen other people in relationships as couples where the husband is more of the emotional one and the wife is not. She's more of the fix-it. So it's just how you're wired, really. But it's true in friendships, because there are God-given relationships that we desperately need to sharpen us. And remember that there's going to be, as well as that nice blade, and now we get to use our gifts, there's also the pain of the sharpening. And I can't say there hasn't been one time where we haven't gone through what we call heated fellowship. That's a good word. Heated fellowship, where I haven't learned something about me. I haven't pruned something in me. I haven't, that it's
I'm more dense, because she can say she learned by it, but it's taken me a long time to figure this stuff out. This week, we had a wonderful example of this.
It was a great heated fellowship. I wish you were there. I wish we were on a reality show.
Yeah, it got hot. And so so just to give you a background. What happened was, Christine receives an email from somebody, and she's really upset about this email. So I come in and I start to talk to her about something else, and she's really upset about this, what this person did and whatever and said, and I just blow it off. It's like, who cares? And I'm trying to change the subject, and she's not letting me change the subject. She's really upset about this. So now I continue to tell her how it doesn't make sense for her to be upset about this situation, because this isn't bad, this is really good. And I start to reason with her why she shouldn't feel the way she feels, which I already told you, don't do that. All right. So now, instead of this person who sent the email, instead of this person being the bad guy, now I'm the bad guy, because I'm not respecting how she feels. And then some words start getting exchanged there, and now all of a sudden, in a situation that had nothing to do with me, my wife is really mad at me, and I don't understand this, and so now I'm mad at her, and we are just going nowhere, but the temperature is rising really quickly.
Y'all there with us now? We didn't need the cameras, right? And so, but it's a good situation. Why? Because now we get to share it with you. So don't be stupid like us, okay? Please just take the steps that we have learned in these. We're celebrating 33 years in August, okay? So we've been at this a long time. But what has happened is that without validating emotions with whoever is hurt, most of the time, this isn't between us. This is that my house is so big that I always say I'm the war room, okay? I can't change metaphors on you, so I'll stay the mansion. Yeah. But I have a lot of people in that house, okay? I'm over all of my staff. At work, I am over a lot of people. I'm over people in Journey. I have friendships. I mean, my room is pretty full, my house. And so if something's bothering me, I just want him to be the one that just listens and just says, oh, that does stink. Yeah, and just like, or
what a jerk she is. Oh, you're right.
Well, no. It's not like we sit around and talk about people either. But it's just that he's thinking of the emotion. You know what I mean? He's dealing with it.
I'm actually, she's hurting and she's upset, right? I'm really not trying to make her more upset. I'm trying for her to not be upset, so I'm trying to fix the problem. But the problem is, she doesn't want me to fix the problem. She wants me to commiserate with her and to validate that I understand how you feel. I see what you're saying. And just shut up. Don't try to explain it away. Don't try to tell her why she's wrong to feel that way, why she shouldn't see it that way. That's what typically, again, and I'm overgeneralizing, but that's what some of us men typically do. We're kind of dumb that way. We don't get it. And so she's in the foyer, and I don't realize that I've got a blind man in my foyer who can't find her way out. I just said him and her, but anyways, I got a blind person in the foyer, right, who can't find her way out of the foyer. I want her to come into the living room where we can just have a reasonable discussion about this and what happened and what we do about it. She's not ready for that. She needs me to go into the foyer and to greet her where she is and to let her know it's okay that you feel that way. I get it.
And just that validating of emotions. Now it's like you feel like you have a teammate. I feel like you have somebody who's really on your side. Because if you think about most of the things that you have a hard time with, that you don't want to build a wall. You don't want to, that's where marriages fail. And that's where friendships fail. It's because this wall has been built and nothing has been done about the emotional wound.
If you look back at the scripture, it says that when a person, it could be a friend, right? But they're offended. Their emotions are now invested in the situation. They're offended, right? It's harder. The walls go up. And you can't get into that. You're not welcome into that city to have fellowship and to have a discussion. Well, that's not really what happened. It really happened this way. I didn't really mean it that way. I meant it this way. I mean, so many times in our marriage, my wife has been really hurt by something that I did or said that was insensitive, and she's really hurt. And so I think the answer is to try to explain to her how I didn't mean it that way, and I didn't actually say that. I didn't actually do that. So now I'm defending, but that's not helping because she is like this fortified city. The walls go up. You can have no reasonable conversation. You can make zero progress. You are not welcome back into the gate of that city. You're not welcome back into peaceful fellowship until you deal with the offense, until the walls go down. How do you deal with that, with the offense? Well, let me say this first since it popped up. When someone is hurting, who's right and who's wrong isn't as important as healing the wound, right? That's big too, right? It's not about who's right and who's wrong. If your wife, your husband, your friend, whatever, somebody you care about, if they are hurting, then it doesn't matter who's right. It doesn't matter who's wrong. It doesn't matter what really happened. The most important thing in that moment is healing that wound. This is what I wanted to get to. How do you break down the walls when your spouse, your friend is offended? The only way that you can actually get back into that city and have peaceful fellowship and grow together is by breaking down those walls. And these are the three things that you have to do for those walls to come down.
And it takes practice, because when you're hurting or you're feeling falsely accused, because maybe this thing didn't have anything to do with whoever you're talking to, but you have to just shut up and listen. And how do you validate? You say, so, and you start to repeat back to him, so you were feeling like, oh. So tell me more. And now you're feeling validated. Now you're feeling like I'm being heard. And it's helping for walls to come down. And then apologize. We had one couple that was in their 50s when we were first starting our first assignment. So here we are, these young pastors in our 20s. And her whole thing she'd say to her husband, whatever he says, he gets upset with me, and And all she would do is just say, "You're absolutely right." And then he couldn't do anything. He would just, all right, it's over. Our argument's over. There's just something
But he's
about
frustrated because
Right.
it didn't really solve anything.
Right. But it's this apologizing, this recognizing the hurt, and then really truly, saying that must feel terrible. And
So
there's a
here's
validation.
where we struggle with this breaking in the walls. First of all, probably more often than not, when a couple or even a friend there's a disagreement, it's not one person is offended; you both get offended. It usually happens that you both are upset, your emotions rise, and you're not going to be able to have a discussion. My wife would say for years, you always defend yourself, and you're like a lawyer. You're always presenting your case. And because I'm trying to deal with it from the aspect of, let's look at this reasonably, right? I'm trying to jerk her into the living room to have a discussion about it. She just needs me to come into the foyer. She needs me to hear what she's saying. All right? She needs to be heard. She needs me to validate her feelings, even if they're wrong. Right? Wrong in the sense that she's hurt by a situation that didn't really happen the way she thinks it happened, but her hurt is real nonetheless. So how do you validate that? You validate it by saying, I see how that could really hurt you. That you're validating the feeling, right? The emotion. And then you apologize. Now here's where I have a problem with this, right? I have to apologize to my wife when I didn't do anything wrong. Right? So you're not necessarily apologizing and saying I did wrong. You're apologizing by saying I'm sorry. I get how you feel. In other words, I'm sorry you feel that way. And that's not just words. I mean, I'm really sorry that you're feeling that. That's horrible. I hurt with you. I'm sorry. Now, I may not be the one who caused it. I may not be the bad guy that she thinks that I am. And so I'm not necessarily apologizing like you're right, I'm wrong necessarily. But in order for the walls to come down, she needs to know I heard her. She needs to know that her feelings matter. And she needs to know that I'm on her side. And guess what? As soon as I do that, as soon as I hit these three things, the walls come down and I'm welcome back into the city.
But the second part of that too is that when we get hurt, then we kind of get clouded into thinking, well, that was it. And so, but we didn't realize that along the way, we could have really hurt the person who was with us at that time. And so it's really important that there's two sides of the coin. And once you just get that release and you feel like, then my ears are wide open. So how do you think we should handle this? Or, then I need him on that. That's where he just compliments me and his whole little fix-it side. But the other part of it too is that because I value him, I could have hurt him in this. Was there something I said? Was there anything that came out in that? There's always two sides of a coin. It's never one is total and the other's not. And I wish we had more time because there's some other stuff.
This doesn't mean you're necessarily wrong, but it means that you care. It means you care enough about the relationship to really hear and to let them know that how they're feeling makes sense. You get it. And to tell them that you're sorry, that you feel their pain, and that you really care. When you do that, it's amazing the progress that you can make in that relationship. Unfortunately, a lot of times we don't do that, so the walls stay up. And through the years, the walls get higher and higher and higher. And then we end up being a couple that's just, more like roommates staying in the same house together, but we don't have that relationship like we used to.
And we don't want to forget, too, those valuable friendships God has put in our lives that we may not have a written covenant with them. So we may think, oh, well, we'll just go to the next person. No, God brought people into all of our lives right now that we desperately need.
Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for what you're teaching us on how to nurture the relationships that you brought into our lives. Lord, the people that you brought into our lives are precious. They're precious to you and are valuable to us. Continue to give us the skills that we can bless them, nurture them, heal them, and draw from them all that the deposits you want them to make into our lives. Now, if you're watching this morning and you've never invited Jesus into your life, that's step number one. We want to invite you to do that right now. It's the simplest thing in the world. All you have to do is say, yes, Jesus. Because God loves you. He loves you so much. He could not stand the thought of you being not in relationship with him. Jesus came, paid for your sin with his blood. He did it all. All that's needed for you to do is say, yes, Jesus, come in. So we're going to pray a simple prayer. If you've never made a decision to follow Jesus, you can make that decision today just by repeating his words. Dear God, I believe that Jesus is your son. You sent him to die for me. He did, and you raised him from the dead. Jesus, I need you, and I invite you into my life. I will follow you. Now, if you prayed that prayer and you meant it, there was nothing magical or mystical about the specific words. It was just you crying out to God, saying, yes, Lord, I need you. Come into my life. But if you made that decision, we want to celebrate you. We want to commend you. We want to salute you this morning. You have become a follower of Jesus today, and your life will never be the same. Hey, thanks for joining us at Journey. God bless you.